Hello and welcome to the Josh Tills Coaching Podcast that we don't really call a podcast, but it is a podcast. But we don't call it a podcast because I think it's a little bit weird and creepy that I'm just a guy in my living room talking to a camera and to a microphone for the most part. Sometimes we have guests and that's really nice when we have guests. But equally, it's an opportunity for me to show a little bit more of myself and for you to get to know me in a little bit better. And the astute amongst you, the ones that are watching as well as listening, will notice that we have a slight scene change. I'm still in my flat, all on my lonesome. Anna's probably going to be home in about another hour or so, which gives us enough time to record this, hopefully. But it is Christmas. Well, it's not Christmas, it's not Christmas Day, but it is the festive time for sure. We are coming into the festive season, and so there's two obstacles that we are having to overcome now. One is that where I typically film, there is a Christmas tree. And so it means that setting up lighting and just having everything where I would normally have it on the desk and stuff, that has been taken away from me, which is okay because the tree looks pretty and that's good. The second issue and barrier that we are having to overcome is the fact that the days are now so incredibly short and it makes us all miserable because it's cold and it's dark 24/7, unless you like that sort of thing, in which case you're a bit of a sick fuck, but you know, you're out there. No, so to be honest, it's so short days and so dark that my dark cave of a flat that I have doesn't really let much light in anyway, and so I have to sort of sit by the window, which is where we have the desk and where I would typically film and record. But where the days are now so short, the times that I typically get in from work means that it's already dark. And so what do? Do I just not record? No, that's not an option. I'm still going to put these podcasts out even all over winter. But I do have a couple of external lights that I've managed to set up. It does take a little bit longer to set up, but that's okay because I love you. And we're going to continue to do this podcast thing, even if it means a little bit more setup. So that's absolutely fine. So I'm a bit more comfy because I'm on the sofa, as you can see. And we've got like I can rest my back and I can sort of set this up over the back of the sofa. So that's really nice. That's really cool. I can almost sort of like pull this in a bit more and can kind of speak free. Hopefully you can still see my face and my facial expressions and some of the hands. I've zoomed in. You don't really need to know why I've sort of made the decisions that I've made, but I've made them and I'm going for it. Hopefully it turns out all right. We'll see. We'll learn as we go. We've got some guests coming on. I'm hoping to sit down with Simon Dutton very soon. I'm seeing him on Friday as part of like a business event that I'm going to, so really, really excited about that. But then also, so we might record then. Depends if I can find like a studio or a location for us to actually sit down and film in that time that's handy enough, because there's like an event and then there's a dinner. And so we're going to both. Is there going to be enough time in between the event and the dinner for us to be able to sit down and record? Failing that, he's relatively close to London. I'm relatively close to London. And that means that we can maybe like hire a studio up in London or something and we can just get into it and sit down and talk for an hour or two, which would be really cool. Really excited to have him on. Luke has agreed to come on the podcast as well and talk nutrition. So I'll kind of set up some topics with him and then we can sort of like dive through some research and stuff and talk quite appropriately. I'm not too sure in terms of like timescales. Like things are ramping up at uni for me now. So in case you didn't know, I am a student osteopath in my first year. And as we come into January, I have one essay that's due, all about tissue healing. So I have to choose 2 out of 4 tissues. So the options are muscle, bone, tendon or ligament. I have to choose 2 out of those 4 and I have to write all about tissue healing and give 2 examples. So let's say if I was choosing ligament, it might be an ACL rupture. Really common, loads of research done on ACL, so that's probably going to be one of the ones that I do. And then excuse me, got a little bit of a tickle as well. And then let's say the other one was like, I don't know, a pec tear, which again, relatively common, or like a bicep tear, relatively common. Should be a load of research about that and potentially some rehab considerations. So I'm going to be busy writing that sort of over Christmas and December. That's due on the 16th of January. So I sort of want to get the first draft of that written fairly sharpish so that I can get someone to review it, hopefully. And then it gives me a little bit of time into January just to do like a second draft and sort of tidy it up. And then that can be submitted for the 16th of Jan, which would be good, get that out of the way. But then I have a load of exams at the end of January as well. So I might go a little bit cold in January. I'm going to try to keep these coming as much as I can in January. But it might go a little bit cold. The fact that I'm even like saying that now and putting that into the universe probably means that I'm not going to be the most consistent person in January on like social media fronts and on podcast fronts, but I'd rather put it out there now where university is the priority for me, and I'm going to do my best. All right. That's a little bit of a life update from me. We're sort of gearing up for Christmas, which is good. And today I wanted to talk about 5 lessons that I learned from being at sea. And now there's being at sea and there's being at sea. And so I spent 43 days out on the ocean with a bunch of absolute lunatics, Darren, Aaron and Simon. Loved them all. But we, like the nutters that we are, we entered a tiny little rowboat that was, I think, about 25 foot long in length. I'll like pop some pictures up as well. And we set off from California and we rowed across the Pacific Ocean, specifically the Midwest Pacific. So that was from Monterey in California all the way over to Hawaii, and we specifically chose to dock to land in Honolulu, Waikiki. Waikiki Yacht Club has a very special place in my heart. And so, yeah, that was sort of like a cool thing that I did in 2021, in case none of you don't really know about it. I like say to people that I don't talk about it much, but I do talk about it a lot. Like anyone that I meet, if there is ever an opportunity to throw in the fact that I have rowed across an ocean, I will take that opportunity. Best believe that those words are coming out of my mouth, because it's incredibly rare for someone to row across an ocean. I think like since I've done it, there's been more people that have done it, but when our team did it in 2021, I think there was only like 55 people in history that had done it. So, you know, like more people had gone to space than had rowed across that part of the ocean. So yeah, like it's a rare thing, and like there's typically a lot of questions that come out of it, so it's a good way to sort of have some conversation with people, because, you know, it's sort of like, oh, like, did you have a support boat? And it's like, nope, just us 4 people in a boat all alone out at sea, traveling 2,700 nautical miles. And I'm talking a little bit blasé about it now, but I sort of have to remind myself, like, just the magnitude of the thing that we did. Like, it is absolutely bonkers and absolutely mad. That, yeah, 4 people in a tiny rowboat out at sea rowing. And the way that we rowed 1 hour on, 1 hour off. So you would row for an hour, then you would have an hour off, and you could go into your cabin, you could make some food, you could have a drink, you could get your head down for some sleep, if any. Organise your admin, like your clothes and stuff like that, if you could ever get any of them dry, depending on what the conditions were like. And you kept on going, hour on, hour off, hour on, hour off, until you get to the other end. And obviously you've got like an auto, which is like we had not obviously, it's not obvious, sort of, why would you know this unless you work in marine things, but you have an auto helm, and you pop your waypoint, and your waypoint might be on a bearing of, 240 degrees. Pop that into the auto helm, and the auto helm keeps you on 240 degrees based on the wind, the current, and all of that sort of stuff. And when your auto helm breaks, you then have to foot steer based on a compass, and you just keep on 240 degrees, and you turn your foot in or out to sort of try and keep that compass on 240 degrees as best as possible. Thankfully, we had the help of an auto helm for most of the way. It broke for a little while, and then it came back to life, and the auto helm appropriately got a nickname of Frankenhelm, because it came back to life. It broke on us, and we thought we were going to have to foot steer like 1,500 miles, which would have been absolutely awful. But then our auto helm came back to life, and we named him Frankenhelm, and he got us like most of the rest of the way. I think it might have been like 200 miles off the coast of Hawaii, and then he died on us, and we all did a minute silence for Frankenhelm, because like that auto helm was the little engine that could. Honestly, like, so impressed with that auto helm. Thankfully, we had a spare, and we popped the spare on, and that took us the rest of the way, which, thank God. But yeah, so kind of talking a little bit about it like blasé now, but like it is an incredible thing, and I sort of have to remind myself just how incredible it is that I've done that quite a lot of the time. The sheer magnitude of it is like mad to me still, to be honest. And like the Pacific is such a big ocean, like it's crazy. Like I think it's there's actually like a point of nowhere. I don't know what the coordinates are, but it's in the Pacific Ocean where like the scale of how far everything is from that point is just insane. And so like, yeah, that's like one of the coolest thing. Well, it is the coolest thing that I've ever done, is to be completely unsupported, eating freeze-dried meals for 43 days, rowing for an hour, resting for an hour, massively sleep deprived. My hands were in bits. My arse was in bits because it just had salt sores all over it. You can never get anything dry. You're rowing in pitch black and all of a sudden you get clattered by a wave and it would take you off your seat. And yeah, just like some horrible times. And, you know, like I'm sure I could go into so many stories. If like you've got any questions about it, let me know. Shitting into a bucket, like pretty grim. And yeah, just sort of like being open to the elements, like times when the sea is absolutely ferocious and we were in like 50-foot waves, 50-foot swells, and just like, God, this is outrageous. And times when the ocean was just like glass, and yeah, like such beauty. Times when like the stars that you see out there is absolutely wild, like just the view of the Milky Way and the stars, and yeah, like you can see planets, not clearly obviously, but you can tell the difference between a star and a planet and stuff like that. You can sometimes do that here, but yeah, just the sheer magnitude of the stars and how bright it is when there's nothing out there. Nearly getting run over by some warships and nearly declaring war on a US warship, which I'll tell you now. So like the alarm started going off one morning, and it's an alarm that we hadn't heard before. And we were like, oh, what's that? And you have something called AIS, which is sort of like a detection for other boats, and it detects at what point you two boats are going to crash. But this alarm starts sounding off that we hadn't heard. And I'm like, what's that? And I'm rowing and Simon's behind me. And so like Darren's asleep in the cabin, and I try to wake Darren. I'm like, Darren, Darren, you know, and I'm like having little jokes. I'm like, it's time for school. And then like this alarm's still going and he's still not waking up, and then I'm like, Darren, like absolutely call out, and he like shoots up, and obviously there's this sound of this alarm that he's not heard. And at that point, Simon, like while I'm trying to wake Darren up, Simon's turned around and has seen a ship, and he's like, there's a ship, and then we can fully see that it is a warship. So we look on the on our like navigation, our like chart plotter, which is digital, and you can see like the other boats that are listed on AIS on there, and we look on there, and it just says US government vessel. Typically you would say the name of the ship when you were contacting them, but it just says US government vessel. And so the rule of the ocean is the vessel with more maneuverability moves out of the way for the other. Now, we're in a rowboat. We are not very maneuverable. I mean, we are, but we don't have an engine. Anything with an engine is going to be more maneuverable than us. We don't have an engine, so everyone else should really be moving out the way for us. US government vessel is not moving. So anyway, Darren's seen that there's a ship, and he gets on the talkie, our sort of like our communications, sticks it on the regular channel, which I think is channel 16. Some use channel 8 as well, but that's like your emergency channel that you should always have on. And he's like, US government vessel, US government vessel, US government vessel. This is FS1, currently on plot to collide in 0.3 miles. Please confirm that you're going to move out of the way, in what direction, so we know to expect some of the waves that your ship is going to produce for us. Nothing happens. Says it again. Nothing happens. Says it again, and we at this point start to panic because we are getting closer and we can see more of this ship and just how big it is and stuff like that. And so we brought a flare gun with us because, you know, you need a flare gun if you're going to be out at sea. And so we start to think, right, well, we're going to row hard. We're going to start to move out of the way. But also, let's get that flare gun, and if it gets close enough, we're going to shoot that flare gun at this ship. We ain't going down without a fight, baby. Yeah, we're gonna shoot a flare at this ship if it gets close enough. And so Darren's like looking for the flare gun. We're like setting the auto helm to move us out of the way and to move, I think it was starboard. out of the ship. No, sorry, it was port out of the ship. So we were going to move port side to the ship, to the warship that was approaching us. And then as Darren like finds the flare gun, we finally hear back through the comms, through the chart plotter, FS1, 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 this is US government vessel. We couldn't see you on the radar, we could see you on the radar, but we couldn't see any vessel out there, because that just puts it into context of like how tiny we are. They couldn't see us from their like view, like we're just a blip to them. So like they could see us on the radar. And I think what had happened is that the captain was asleep, because it was still early in the morning. Like the sun had just risen, I think. And so like they were like getting like these sounds through that someone's out there, and it says that someone's out there on the radar, but where the fuck are they? And so someone's gone to get the captain. The captain's like woken up, come down, has like looked through like some magnifying glasses or something, I don't know, some sort of binoculars, has gone, it's those four. What the fuck are they doing out here? And so they've said, yeah, look, we're going to move we're going to move starboard side. So we're going to avoid you. No problem at all. So they avoid us. And then like 30-40 seconds after they have cleared us, like some people come out onto the dock. They're like waving at us. And they're like just amazed at what we're doing. And they come on the comms and like, what on earth are you doing? We're like, we're rowing across the ocean in aid of charity. At first I think Darren made a joke because Darren was on comms, and at first I think he thought it was like, oh, I've just popped out for some milk. That still makes me laugh. And so, but then no, we sort of said, look, we're rowing across the ocean for charity. This is what we're doing. And yeah, they were super impressed. They were like, look, do you need anything? Like, do you need any help, any support? We were like, no, we're all good. I can't remember what day this was on, but yeah, we'd sort of gone through like the real shitty part. And then off they went. We sort of like had a little wave with some US Navy men, some US seamen, and then on our way we went, and on the way they went, and they pissed off into the void, into the nothingness over the horizon. So that's sort of like one story, just to take up a little bit of time into this intro. I'm going to keep hitting this. Because I've got this new like thing that amplifies the voice, I think, apparently. So I'm testing that out today, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep hitting this, and I think it looks like a bit of an eyesore, but it is what it is. We do what we can do. So anyway, I've kind of given you a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of a taste of sort of like what kind of happened on that trip, and sort of like some of the experiences, which was absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing. But today I'm going to share with you the 5 lessons that I learned from rowing across the Pacific Ocean. And just to sort of like preface this, it was super difficult. Like, I can't even put into words just how much it obliterated my body. My back was fucked for so long. My wrist partially ruptured a tendon in my hand when I tried to keep hold of an oar and a wave took me. I've still got scars on my arse from salt sores. Just like all sorts. I'm pretty sure like sleep deprivation for that long and to that scale really, really screwed with me. Like, I still struggle to sleep through the night now, to be honest. And yeah, sort of like just some of the stuff like the physical toll that it took on me was mad. And sort of me, Darren, Aaron and Simon, we sort of joke that like, yeah, we won the battle, we crossed the ocean, but Mother Nature, she won the war. Like, she's got our number, man. Like, like just the sheer amount of stress we faced out on that ocean and stuff like that. She beat us fair and square. She's playing the long game, but yeah, she's got us. But that all being said, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Like, honestly, like if the opportunity arose to cross another ocean, I would 100% do it. And just to sort of preface, the endurance limits guys, so Darren, Aaron and Simon, they are rowing the length of the Amazon River in 2024. It was something that I really wanted to do, but I have other commitments, I have other arrangements. So there's a couple of reasons that I had to pull out. One is that a place on these sorts of things is incredibly expensive. I won't necessarily say the amount, but to sort of like be included in these things is expensive. And I had plans, so I was going to be employed, which I was when I did the row. Sorry, no, I wasn't actually. That's a lie. But it was just COVID, so like I hadn't worked in ages, and I was like a little bit depressed from going self-employed, and then COVID hit in pretty much immediately, and I just felt like I needed an adventure, and a little bit of like another shock thing, just because I'm working in tangents as I always do. So I wasn't meant to be on that boat. Darren asked me when they were first sent out, like, is it something you'd be interested in? And I was like, look, to be honest, mate, like, life's just a bit hectic at the moment. This is sort of what I'm planning. Don't really think it's like the right time. Had someone else to do it, which was a gentleman called Darren Baker, and I was sort of like helping them prepare for the row, a little bit of coaching stuff. I was helping with, they had a podcast, and I was sort of like helping them with like the podcast stuff, and I was helping Darren with like stuff with the boat. So I was fairly involved in the process a little bit without being actually in the boat at that point. And then about 6 weeks before they were due to leave to go to California, Darren Baker, the gentleman that I replaced, had a hernia, and so had to pull out, wasn't going to be able to row across the ocean. So it left the team in a really sort of like tight spot of, well, who are we going to get to row across this ocean with us? And I was living in Darren's garage at the time. Darren had his had like a studio flat that I was renting, and so I was living there, and then all of a sudden he's like, Josh, do you want to come bum around an ocean? And I was like, yeah. And it went literally like as quickly as that, because they needed someone. COVID had just happened, so all the gyms were shut, and I think gyms were just opening as we left. I think I might have been back at work for like 2-3 weeks, and then I went. But yeah, I felt like I was probably quite depressed because I'd gone self-employed, and then like 2 weeks later, gyms had shut due to COVID, and I was like working night shifts in Tesco's, and just felt really down and stuff like that. And so I just felt like I needed an adventure, and like the stars almost aligned in terms of like Darren Baker unfortunately experiencing a hernia, them needing to replace him and find someone else, and me being appropriately like out of work and sort of available to do this row. And so like that's sort of how I got onto it. And then within 6 weeks time, we were out on the ocean and we were going across the Pacific. So it's kind of like just like that, to be honest. So I wasn't necessarily meant to be on that row on that boat initially, and we're gonna come back to that in terms of one of the lessons that I think I learned. 5 lessons from around across the Pacific, and I've probably gone for like 20 minutes already, just sort of like introducing this topic. And as I say, because I don't necessarily like share it so much, anyone that I meet, if there's an opportunity to talk about it, I will talk about it, but I don't necessarily like parade it on socials and stuff like that. I'll kind of remind everyone every now and then that, look, this is a cool thing that I did. Stop waffling, Josh. Let's get into it. Number 1, the first lesson that I learned from rowing across the Pacific. These aren't necessarily in any particular order, but the biggest lesson that I learned from rowing across the Pacific is just to keep chipping away. And to put this into context, the row between Monterey in California and Waikiki and Honolulu in Hawaii is about 2,700 nautical miles. For any of you that are unaware, nautical miles are longer than regular miles due to the curvature of the Earth. So the fact that there's some curvature, a nautical mile is longer than a regular mile. But yeah, around about 2,700 nautical miles between those 2 points. And we approximately took each about 1 million strokes. So I individually had about 1 million strokes on the oars, one full sort of like rotation, pushing with my legs, pulling with my arms in, and then back out. One stroke. I approximately took 1 million of those across 43 days. Obviously, we didn't keep count, but that's just like an estimation. And so one stroke in isolation didn't move that boat very far. 1 million of them all put together, joint with Simon's million, Darren's million, Aaron's million, moved the boat 2,700 nautical miles, and that's just mad, to be honest. Like the scale and the length of how far that is, it's crazy. And so, like, keep chipping away. There were times when we didn't want to pull on the oars. There were times when none of us wanted to row. We were tired as fuck. We were cold as shit. Like, our hands hurt, our backs hurt, our asses hurt. We were all annoyed at each other, and like, things didn't feel like they were getting any better. The conditions were terrible, pushing us in the wrong direction. It was dark. It was wet. It was horrible, and none of us wanted to row. But, you know, like, we had to row. Like we could stop, and there were a couple of times when we had to stop the boat and we had to deploy a para anchor, so effectively like a big parachute that goes out into the ocean, and that keeps you stable. Make sure that you don't just like drift off. And there were a couple of times that we had to use that in really bad conditions. But it's horrible. It's horrible being on para anchor, because then you've got a cabin that is designed for one. You've got two of you in, and you're sardined in there with nothing to do. You can catch up on some sleep if you can sleep. And there's a story that I could tell you about being on para anchor and just some weird shit happening. If you've heard of the Sirens of the Sea, then yeah, I could sort of talk about the Sirens of the Sea and kind of what I think that noise was, because yeah, it's freaky, and I could definitely give you some more stories about all of that. So being on parachute anchor was terrible, and like, it was like me and Darren in the front cabin had it pretty good because it was more spacious, versus Aaron and Simon. They had it bad if we were on para anchor. Like, they were sardined together. Like, nah. Like, yeah, sort of like kudos to those boys for the times we were on parachute anchor, because it was terrible. But it did influence the fact that none of us wanted to be on parachute anchor because it was terrible. So if we could row, we would row. We would be out on that deck rowing, while the other two got some sleep, got some food, got some fluids in them, whatever. And so, like, we didn't want to. Like it was so fucking horrible. Like, it's so hard to articulate just how horrible in those moments it was. Like, just touching, like, the searing of your hands, because your hands were so sore, you would touch the oars and they would just sear, and for about 15 minutes of the 60, your hands would just be searing in pain. Like, and if you tried to move your hands, they would just like scream at you, and it was this burning that was so deep and so, like, it would cut through you. It was absolutely brutal. And the same with your arse. Like, we had salt sores that were so big on our butts, where like we were just sat and the salt was abrasive and cutting into the arse and stuff like that. And like, you'd sit down and you could not get comfy for love nor mercy. You just could not get comfy, but you just had to row. And like, hopefully I'm doing it justice as to just how horrible it was. And you might be thinking, Josh, why on earth would you do this again? Like, I would 100% do it again, because the win at the end was absolutely beautiful. And some of the things that I got to experience as a result of it, just absolutely incredible. And so I would absolutely do it again in a heartbeat. But I need to explain to you and to express just how awful it was having to sit in that chair when it was absolutely shit conditions, or it was pissing it down with rain, or it was storming, or you were getting clattered by waves and your hands were hurting and your ass was hurting and your back was hurting and you were tired. You'd fall asleep at the oars. If it was dark, you would fall asleep at the oars and you'd keep rowing in your sleep, because you would just had this muscle memory of, if you are in that chair, you are rowing. And you'd chat shit to the person behind you, and you'd debate what the best meal deal is and stuff like that. That was a good bit, but it was horrible experience to be rowing. Sometimes it was great, but a lot of the times it was absolutely awful. But you had to keep chipping away, and bit by bit, stroke by stroke, pull by pull, you got that little bit closer to Hawaii, and you had to have faith that it was getting you that bit closer. Because there would be times when you would row, and then because the currents have changed, or like the conditions were shit, you could row all day. Like, say, like, this was like particularly prevalent within like the last week. We were estimating, based on our average daily distance, it was going to take us 10 days to get to Hawaii from like the last 10 days. But that was on like day 28. We were like, yeah, 10 days left on day 28. The conditions were shit. 10 days left on day 29. Yeah, 10 days left. Conditions were shit. Day 30. 10 days left. Yeah, come on, let's keep going. Day 31. Yeah, 10 days. Like it took us 43 days in the end. And there were so many opportunities in that times when we were just rowing, and it felt like we were rowing for nothing, because you'd row a full day, you'd put in so many hours work. You'd put in 12-hour shifts, hour on, 24 hours a day. You'd row for 12 hours a day, and the new day would start and you're in exactly the same position, just in a different fucking part of the ocean. Like, it was mentally, it was such fuckery. But you had to keep chipping away. You just had to keep going. And so, like, it's such an important lesson, because I think, like, now, when I look at things, the value of consistency is so important. Like I genuinely believe that so many people give up before they can see the fruits of their labour, that I'm such a big believer that if you're just consistent, you will achieve and you will attain the thing that you want to get. Like, have you ever seen anyone do something for 20 years and be shit at it? Not likely. Like, anyone who's been at the same job or been in the same industry doing the same job for 20 years, it's unlikely that they're shit. It's unlikely that they're... I'm going to do that again. Anyone who's been in their job or in the same industry for 20 years, it's unlikely that they're shit at it. Now, I know a few, but, like, it's highly unlikely that they're shit at the thing that they've been doing for 20 years, because you would naturally get this instinct that says, oh, I'm pretty shit at this. And so, like, I'm just such a big believer now that if you can just stay consistent, even when things don't feel like they're going right, just stay consistent, keep chipping away. It's another brick in the wall. It's another pull on the oars. It's another little bit closer to your destination, to attaining the thing that you would like to attain. And that's so important. And I think it's such a big lesson learned from that row, because, as I say, there were times when we didn't want to do any of it, but we kept doing it. And we achieved something incredible out of it. We got to say that we crossed an ocean in a tiny little rowboat and we won a world record. I need to admit, it's not the world record that we were going for. We wanted to break the world record for the fastest time to cross that ocean, and we didn't get that world record because the conditions were really bad. A large part of that world record is dictated by the weather conditions. The world record that we did get, which is a funny story, a lot of stories from that ocean are funny stories. The world record that we have is for being the oldest team to cross the Pacific. And you're probably looking at this going, Josh, I thought you were 28. I was 26 when I did it. So the world record is taken as an average of the team. So that just goes to show you how old the other lot were, for the fact that I was 26 at the time and we still had so I brought the average way down, and yet we still have the average oldest age of a team to row across the Pacific from California to Hawaii. My dog's barking at me because he wants to go out, but Toadie, you're going to have to wait, mate. I'm sorry, because we're knee deep into a podcast. If you really need, then I'll pause the podcast and we'll go out. But hopefully you can wait like 20 more minutes, because now I'm going to have to blitz through these other lessons. So that's lesson number 1. Keep chipping away. Keep being consistent, even when you don't want to. The powers of consistency are so valuable. Lesson number 2 is all about patience. Now, I pride myself on being an extremely patient guy, and any one of the other 3 guys, Darren, Aaron and Simon, I think would tell you that Josh's superpower is super patience. I lost my shit once on that boat, and they all lost their shit many times. I think just being patient in the thing that you want and like the thing that you need to do. Like, there were so many times that I could have lost my shit, or I could have been frustrated in the thing that like I needed to do, but I was just patient and just like kept on putting that forward. Like, I will not let the ocean beat me. Like, I honestly saw the row as a game of patience. Like, it was a test of wills. It was a battle of wills between me and Mother Nature, the ocean, in terms of who can be the most patient. And I feel like the ocean was trying to wear us down with really bad conditions, bad tide, bad current, wearing us down patiently, just waiting to swallow us. And I saw it as, well, I'm going to outpatient you, and I'm going to be even more patient than you, and I'm not going to worry about the bad conditions. I'm not going to worry about the bad tide. I'm not going to worry about the bad wind. I'm not going to worry, not bad wind, just bad gusts of wind. I'm not going to worry about like bad anything, bad weather. I'm not going to worry about any of that. I'm just going to get into my hour, row my shift as well as I can, and get out. There was the other example of patience, which was that Simon experienced. So I was always rowing with Simon. Simon was always behind me. Darren and Aaron would row together. Me and Simon would always row together. On the most part, there were a couple of occasions when we rowed with different people, but for the most part, I would always row with Simon. And Simon experienced a shoulder injury, and for quite a while, he couldn't row his entire hour. And like I think I'm like more than comfortable to say, I think everyone's sort of like aware that it's not going to piss anyone off to say that some people like Darren and Aaron were losing patience in the fact that Simon couldn't row a whole hour because of like the impact on the mission in terms of the time that it would take us to get to Hawaii and just stuff like that. But I stayed incredibly patient. I was incredibly patient with Simon in terms of injuries. Obviously, having worked with people with injuries, I was very sympathetic to the fact that he wanted to row, but he couldn't because of an injury. The pain was a bit too much. And we were all in pain, and I think that kind of like lended itself to like Darren and Aaron sort of like losing patience at times and sort of like being short on patience, was the fact that they were like, well, I'm hurting as well, you know, like, but I'd kind of like put everything out of my brain. Wind, weather, current, tide, like other people. And I just got on with what I needed to get on with. And I was always friendly. I was always on hand to help anyone. If anyone needed their drinks topping up, I would top up the drinks. I would make like food for people at like 3 a.m, even if it impacted my sleep and stuff like that. So like sort of while I say that I just sort of focused on myself, I was like focused on the team, but I was just incredibly like determined to be patient with all of the elements and all of the facets of that row. And I genuinely think that like it is a superpower to be really, really patient. And there are all times, and I think sometimes contextually, like certain people can test your patience more than others. I know that like for myself, I'm the most like relaxed, like easygoing person when it comes to like everyday people. But with my family, I'm probably not as patient in those environments. And I think like your family knows how to get the better of you. They equally like whittle you down. I'm not like a saint I'm not saint patient. Like I'm not a saint when it comes to patience, but I do try to like wear someone else's shoes and put myself in someone else's shoes to sort of like empathize and to think, right, well, how must this feel for them? And I think that when you do that, it makes being patient that little bit easier. And so that's sort of like the second lesson, is not necessarily like patience. Patience isn't a lesson, but just the impact that patience has and how much of a superpower being patient can be. So that's lesson number 2. Really, really quick one. Really, really easy. The third one kind of comes back and sort of like intertwines with, actually, I'm not going to do that one. I'm going to change it. I could sort of like say, I was going to say about delayed gratification and how much of a skill delayed gratification is, but it goes back to the keep chipping away thing, right? Like doing things when you don't want to do them and being able to delay gratification. We could have all delayed like the gratification to just sort of like be somewhere comfy and cozy. We could have like, there were many opportunities which I can speak about, and I can tell you stories of when we thought we were in the shit and we thought it was time to get on the emergency contact channel and signal for help and abandon that fucking mission. Many times, many opportunities. But like, and like that would have given us instant not instant because the nearest boat could be 500 miles away, but it could have given us the instant gratification of we ain't got to row this boat anymore. We ain't got to be in pain anymore. And we could have, like, relatively quickly, we could have been sat in a pub, having a laugh, nice and warm, nice and dry, no salt sores, no blisters on your hands, no back pain, no whatever, like, comfy. But the power and the skill of delayed gratification and being able to say, no, we're going to do this hard, challenging, shitty thing for the bigger win at the end. And the bigger win at the end is being able to say that you've done something that only at the time 55 people had done before in history, and like to conquer something like the beauty in that, and to see some of the sights, to see some of the stars, like you can't take a picture. Like, I would love to share a photo of just how bright and how fascinating the stars was, but I can't because we didn't have camera gear. The boat's always moving because you're out in the ocean, and it's always moving because you're at the, so like you can't even have a shutter be still to capture all of that light in because you're always moving. In the same breath, like we only had phones on us. Like, phone camera isn't getting anywhere near to capturing that level of light and that level of beauty. And so like part of me can't help but feel like that's one of the little wins that we got of delayed gratification, was the fact that only those who dare to do something like that and go that far off the coast get to see the beauty of the stars in the absolute pitch black where no light has ever touched it. So that's like one of the things that I like that's one of the wins that I hold really near and really dear to me. So that would be a lesson. You're getting a bonus lesson in that delayed gratification, even though it's a bit of an extension on keep chipping away. The lesson that I'm actually going to go to is just how transferable being strong is. And hopefully I don't sound too arrogant here, but I would like to think that I'm pretty strong. I'm not the strongest guy in the world. There are plenty of people that are stronger than me. One of my objectives has always been to be stronger than you look. I think a lot of people look at me and they don't necessarily assume that I'm going to be pretty strong. But if I'm blowing my own trumpet for half a second, if you'll allow me, I would say that I'm pretty strong. Even like in gym circles, I'd say I'm kind of in that upper echelon, depending on the movement and stuff like that. But I have spent a lot of time trying to be strong and trying to be stronger than I look. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I was not meant to be on that boat. Right, I got given the go-ahead 6 weeks before we departed the UK, and I didn't even get that much time in the UK to really train and to really prepare, because I was running around. You have to have a qualification, a certification in like pretty much how to read currents and how to read waypoints and how to know what like waypoint you, or like what bearing you need to be on to get to a waypoint when you're factoring in wind and current and stuff like that. So like for most of that 6 weeks, I was rushing trying to get that. I was rushing trying to get my safety of life at sea. You have to have another qualification, which is like a safety of life at sea and how to deploy a life raft and stuff like that. So like, I didn't really have much time to train. I had zero time to train for this. And like normally, if you do an event of this sort of magnitude, of this sort of size, it should take over your life. Like the training and the preparation that goes into something like this should be huge. And to be quite frank, I hardly had any. Like once we got out onto the like ocean, we had like 2-3 weeks in Monterey where we had the boat, and we were just out like in the sort of like in sort of outside the harbour but protected by the sea wall sort of thing before we really got off into the ocean. We were sort of rowing around there, so it gave me an opportunity to sort of learn the skill of ocean rowing. And like one of the hardships of ocean rowing is that just getting 2 oars, it's not like a traditional row, right, where the river is always at that point. So if you drop the oars that amount, your oars are going to go into the water at this specific point, and you can pull nice and hard and you can get a really efficient, effective stroke. You're moving on such angles and stuff like that even getting 2 oars in the ocean at any one time is extremely difficult. And so like you have to be patient with that. You have to be patient with the fact that you're not always going to have a perfect stroke. Things aren't going to be perfect. But the ability to like be strong and how that transferred, the skill transferred really nicely, because I just had loads of time to invest into the skill of ocean rowing. But the fact that I was strong, I think lended itself really well to being resilient and robust enough to handle 43 days of rowing 12 hours a day without being a rower or spending lots of time in a rowing position. I'd done lots of deadlifting. I had a really strong back from deadlifting. I'd invested so much time just into having a strong back, a strong grip, all of those sorts of things. Don't get me wrong, I still have really bad like tendinopathies and like flare-ups of tendinitis from that much rowing that quickly, and like the dosage like response of how quickly I went into that much rowing, it's had an effect on like my tendons and stuff like that, for sure, no doubt. But on the most part, I'm pretty good as well. Like I've like recovered really well, and sort of like, as I say, I'll do another one, but I will actually do one where I had the time to train and appropriately prepare. So like I do think that being strong is super important, and that's why I'll sort of like focus a lot of my time with anyone on, can we just get as strong as fuck, like really fucking strong, stronger than you think. I don't think you can ever be too strong. There's like a bit of a like quote cliche thing which is like, you can't go wrong with strong, and it's true. You genuinely can't go wrong with strong. Like it'll give you so much back, and then I think that if you have like some basic skills in coordination and rhythm and agility and timing and stuff like that, then you're gonna be like athletic enough to handle most tasks that life will throw at you, even if it's rowing across an ocean. So that's my third lesson, is that you can never go wrong with strong, and that strength carries over, and how strength carries over to other activities and other experiences in life is really, really good. Lesson number 4 is going to be like a bit of like a quippy one, less serious, but it's going to be all about sleep deprivation, because like how important sleep is. I learned that lesson so that like, man, I cannot tell you just the damages and like the dangers of sleep deprivation. Like if you're a new parent, you will know like about sleep deprivation, and like your sleep deprivation is different to the sleep deprivation that I experienced, because obviously like you probably have like 5 years, potentially, maybe shorter, maybe longer, I don't know, obviously every kid is different and stuff. I'm not a parent, of like sleep deprivation, but like 1 hour on, 1 hour off, and like what you do, like you'd really have like 6 shifts in the dark. So it was like, probably like 4 shifts in the dark. Yeah, it was like 8 hours. So like 4 shifts of rowing, 4 hours worth of like actual sleeping time before the sun would start coming up and that. And so like that 4 hours as well was so heavily interrupted, because like if Darren was rowing the water maker to fill up his water bottle, you would get, or to make himself a cup of tea or whatever, you would just get this sound like shouldn't have done that with a sore throat, should I? And that would make you, and that would wake you up. They might be having a chat and stuff like that, and you'd hear them, and that would keep you up. You might get absolutely clattered by a wave, and it would send you into the wall next to you, and that would wake you up. So like even sometimes the hour that you would get was so heavily disrupted. You were always on edge of like, what's out there? Like, are we going to get run into by a ship and stuff with no AIS on? Is that alarm going to go off? Are the conditions going to turn really bad all of a sudden, and we're going to find ourselves in a situation? All sorts. And like, there's so many stories I could tell you of that. So I've got this itchy nose all of a sudden. That's better. Nope. That's better. And so coming back to just like, how valuable sleep is, like, 1 hour on, 1 hour off. And as I say, if you're a new parent, or like you've gone through like bouts of like insomnia, or like just times of being sleep deprived, like you'll know what I'm talking about here, like just how valuable sleep is. Just how shitty I felt, and like the hallucinations that I experienced off of the result of it. I can tell you a few about those. Like there was one hallucination where I hallucinated that I gave all of the other guys Darren. So like there's a little bit of a pretext. I love squashies. Squashies, like, as the sweet, like one of my favourite like one of my favourite snacks. I could always demolish a bag of squashies. And so if you're going to be bumming around on the ocean for 43 days, you take a lot of squashies with you. I paid an extortionate amount of money to import, like, when I say like 16 bags of squashies into the US, because I should have taken them with me, but I didn't. And I paid an extortionate amount of money per squashie. I'm not going to reveal that amount of money because people will judge me hard. But like, I needed my squashies, people. Joshy needed his squashies. And so like, yeah. But like I like hallucinated that I gave everyone else, Darren, Aaron and Simon, a bag of squashies. Now, I should have known that was a hallucination because I ain't sharing my squashies for shit. But like, it was so clear, and this went on for like 20 minutes, that I like imagined like writing a little note for Darren and putting him in his little cubby for when he got off his shift as like, enjoy the squashies, mate, we're doing good as a team, and like taking a bag of squashies out to Aaron and Simon and being like, here's a bag of squashies, enjoy lads, yeah, good team moment. Wanting to be the good team member that I am. And it was all completely made up. Like, I came, like Darren popped his head out of the cabin and I was like, oh, how were your squashies, mate? And he was like, what fucking squashies? And I was like, squashies, I left them in your cubby, what you doing? You like idiot. And like, it was like, mate, there's no squashies in my cubby. And I was like, what? And then I was like, yeah, well, I gave some squashies to Aaron and Simon as well. And like, Simon was behind me, rowing. And he was like, no, you fucking didn't. You made that up. And then it's like come about that I was completely off my nut, just hallucinating that I had bags of squashies that I was giving away. Like some kind of Ebenezer Scrooge at the end of A Christmas Carol, just throwing squashies away like I'm some sort of like squashy king, which, you know, I was. Like, to be fair, I had a lot of squashies, but, you know, I've never given those squashies away. So yeah, like the sort of like other hallucinations, you'd be like 1,000 miles off the coast and you would just see like skyscrapers, like you'd see a city out at sea and you'd have to just like blink and like rub your eyes and be like, nah, that ain't real. That we're 1,000 miles off the coast. We are far from everything. The other one that would really play with your mind, and your brain plays such tricks on you. So when you pull on the oars, it would create this foam in the water, and your brain starts seeing words out of the foam. So like, I would see like mum ? And all of a sudden your brain starts playing tricks and you're going, is my mum alright? What happens if she's not alright? This, that and the other. Well, I'm 1,000 miles off the coast. I can't exactly just call her up or like pop my head round her house sort of thing. Like, I don't know. And your brain plays amazing tricks on you when you're sleep deprived. Another one would be like the auto helm. When it's changing your direction to keep you on your bearing to get to your waypoint, it makes a sound to change the rudder. So it's constantly moving to change the angle of the rudder to keep you on your bearing to get to your waypoint. But that sound you will misconstrued. And I used to hear like the sounds of little girls calling out for help. So it'd be like, help. Like, and you would look around because you were just so fucked. Like, you were so tired and so sleep deprived that your brain would just like look for these like links of something. Of like, it was a rudder that was changing position at the result of an auto helm, but your brain just couldn't help but like decide that it was like a little girl calling out for help. I'm gonna need to give my dog some food. So you sit there and I'll edit this out. I'm going to have to give him some food. You're a menace. Okay. We're back. We have fed the hound. We've given him some fish crispies and we've given him a little sweet potato chew, which he loves. You're probably going to hear some crunching from Mr. Toad going to town on a fish crispy while I can sort of finish this off. So yeah, sleep deprivation and the value of sleep, like the tricks that your brain will play on you, is absolutely wild. The tricks that your brain will play on you is absolutely wild, and just the value of sleep is crucial, and I'm always aware of that. So now anyone who tells me that they're not sleeping, whether it's because they've got a newborn baby, whether it's because they're like going through something stressful, they've got a big pitch or a big meeting on or something like that, like I'm very, very aware of like the impact that has and how that impacts my coaching when someone isn't sleeping, maybe the level of workout or the level of intensity that I'm going to take someone through and those sorts of things, because I'm just so aware of how crucially important and how much sleep deprivation can fuck with someone. And so that was lesson number 4. And so we got one lesson left of the biggest lesson that I learned from being at sea for 43 days. And this is going to be all about support network. So having a good support network is critical. And I would say that we acted as such a good team. I absolutely love each and every one of those guys. Aaron, Darren and Simon. We don't talk as much as we should because we all live our own lives and we're all very busy and stuff like that. But I've got so much respect, so much love and so much time for any one of those guys. And having a strong support network, like I hadn't met Aaron or so. I've met Aaron and Simon like twice before doing that row. As I say, I wasn't meant to be on that boat. And so like just to be able to connect so much with like that group of guys and like what they gave me, and I'm sure what I gave them, because like we all helped each other and dug each other out of like holes on that boat. Like having a strong support network can take you so far, and like that's just the people on the boat with me. That's just Darren, Aaron and Simon. I haven't even spoken about the support network that I had back at home. I had clients who were like really good at sort of like training with other people while I was away. I had a partner. I was still with Anna, my girlfriend who I'm still with now, and she held shit down so phenomenally well. She was putting out things on social media in terms of what we were doing. She was like taking care of like the rent and bills all by herself while I was away. She was still working. My mum, my dad, my brother were incredibly supportive and stuff like that. My nan and granddad were supportive. Like there were so many people that supported me during that time, that I'm definitely just aware of like how the success of that mission and how the success of us getting from one end to the other was largely down to the support network. And even then, like I could keep going, because there was a guy that we met in California, a guy named Alan, and he didn't know us from Adam, but we were having some difficulties in California, and he was just a really handy guy to know. He was an ex-army ranger, and so really handy, like knew how to just sort of like source things and get hold of things and like prepare things for us. And he was sort of like we met him as an off chance, and he helped us so much and just constantly went out of his way. Like the goodness of people, like doing something like that will reinstill your faith in humanity 100%. And so like having a good support network was great. We met some great friends out in California that like I'll still like speak to a little bit now as well and still have interactions with now. But yeah, like the success of that mission was largely due to the fact that we had an incredible support network. All of our families, all of our friends, and all of us individually. Like I don't think there's any male teams that have finished a Pacific crossing, all male teams, and have still been on speaking terms, because there's a lot of male testosterone energy, and you end up arguing. And like we had a few arguments, but nothing major, and we came together and we complemented each other as a team so well, that like the success of the mission and like the way that we did it, and we overcame so many barriers, like equally out on the ocean, but even just in the build up to get that boat over to America and in the water during the height of COVID, like really important, and like important to note. So like just the value of having a good support network when you're doing something that is big, when you're doing something that is new, is incredibly valuable. And that's sort of where I want to leave things in terms of these 5 lessons. So just to recap, we've got keep chipping away, we've got What was the second one? Patience. Patience is a superpower. The third one was all about can't go wrong with strong. Fourth one was all about sleep deprivation and the value of sleep, and then the fifth one was all about having a good support network. And so, as I say, I've got loads of stories from the boat. I've got like a journal of like each day that we did and sort of what happened that day and sort of like the highlights. So I could talk for hours and hours on end about that row, and like I'm kind of like, I don't necessarily want to keep talking about it because like I don't want like my life to be like this one highlight of like, oh, I did this cool thing. Like I've got loads of shit on my list that I want to do. I would love to row another ocean. I would love to do the second leg of the Pacific. I would love to go from Hawaii and either do it in 3 and go Hawaii to Fiji, or I would love to do a really big one and go Hawaii all the way to Australia and finish under the like sort of by the Sydney Opera House and Sydney Bridge. Like I just think that'd be incredible. And so like that, like I've got running events I'd like to do. Like if you're not aware, I've run 3 marathons and a couple of ultra marathons, so I've done like a fair bit of running, and there's more runs and like running events that I would like to do more in like the expeditionist style with like multi-day events, carrying all your own gear and stuff like that. And so like I would love to do all of that. Money's a big factor. And time's a big factor. I'm equally like I'm a full-time student, I'm running a business and stuff like that, but all of those things are on my radar, and so I don't want to keep talking about this row as if like I'm done, like I've done this event, like ticked it off. That's like the one story in my life that I'm always going to go to. It's probably why I don't talk about it enough. But coming back to the main theme, I've got so many stories of like stuff that happened on that boat, and just sort of like some of the trials and tribulations that I would be happy to share. And so if you have any questions, any comments, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're watching on Spotify or listening on Apple Podcast, then feel free to send me a message. My Instagram handle is in the show notes, as well as my website, my email address. Feel free to get in contact with me, ask me any questions, and I'll be more than happy to get back to you with a reply. Or I could just sort of like do a bit of a Q&A, and I can answer any row related questions in one Q&A episode. That's equally something that I'm happy to do. But yeah, that's going to be it from me today. It's been really, really nice to sort of like relive some of those sort of experiences and sort of break it down into 5 sort of key takeaway lessons. Some of you are probably going to think that it's just sort of like some simple generic stuff like, yeah, obviously keep chipping away, obviously like being patient and all of those, like, yeah, having a good support. Like it probably seems obvious, but it's never a bad thing to sort of like rehash and to sort of like reaffirm like just how important those things are, and using the example of something extreme to really sort of highlight those lessons. And they weren't necessarily like lessons that I learned, like I already knew that being patient was a good thing, but it just highlighted it to me like I think in that instance how good like being patient was. It highlighted how having a good support network means everything else is so much easier. It highlighted these things and it reaffirmed them as a lesson in my brain at the age of 26, when COVID was going on and things were a little bit shit. So that's everything from me today. Thank you very, very much for tuning in and watching/listening to another episode of the Josh Tills Coaching Podcast. I'm going to try and keep these episodes coming at you thick and fast. As I say, I've got some guests that I'm desperate to have on very soon. And as I say, I am equally aware that uni is getting busy and stuff like that. So I'll do my best to keep these coming. As I say, you can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Threads and TikTok and all of these sorts of places. Follow me on YouTube, and if you are interested in online coaching, then please do reach out for me. Maybe you're seeing this episode because you are planning to row an ocean, and if you would like any advice on how to row an ocean and kind of what I would do physically differently to sort of like row an ocean, because I've definitely got some thoughts on that, and in terms of what I see from other like ocean rowing coaches and stuff like that, there's some things that probably I would do quite differently. So if you would like any advice, any guidance, online coaching is an option, and this is just me just trying to plug my services. I'm terrible at like promoting my own services, but I need to do it. We need to pay the bills, and hopefully if you're watching this and you are someone that would like to engage in online coaching, you will come to me and you will think of me when you think of online coaching, because while I'm not a really harsh, pushy salesperson, hopefully you think I'm an alright guy, and I think that's one of the most important parts when you're working with a coach, is having a good relationship, thinking, yeah, I could get on well with that person, and that's going to lead to some incredible incredible outcomes. So if you're someone who wants to be pushed and to achieve a result in a time frame, then we can work on that. And if I don't get you your goal, I will coach you for free until you do. Simple as that. So that's sort of like my obligation to like the business done. I'm talking to this camera. I'm signing off. Thank you very much for watching, for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Peace.